Hey, friends. This is Martine Williams, and I am obsessed with all things mompreneur life and helping you to remix your priorities, your habits, your mindsets, and yes, even your relationships so that you can build a successful business without losing yourself in the process. I'm also obsessed with the color turquoise and lyrics of the 80s and 90s, but that's beside the point. Girlfriend, you don't have to hustle 24/7, 365 and continue to sacrifice your health, your relationships, and your sanity to be a successful mompreneur. As a small town girl living in a lonely world to a six-figure mompreneur, I am here to teach you how. There is a better way, and this podcast is your one-stop shop for all of the how-tos, the encouragement, the life hacks, the success tips, and of course, a little side of tough love. This is the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. So let's do this. Hey, friends, and welcome back to the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. Today's episode, we're going to be continuing our conversation or our series on romance and marriage, since we're in the love month of February. And I want to thank you for continuing to follow the show, to share the show with your friends, and the messages that you send me of encouragement about each episode that really helps you or encourages you. Maybe it challenges you, but it's what keeps me going with creating podcast episodes. So thanks so much. Appreciate your support so much. So today I thought, I've shared with you in previous podcasts some of my favorite books for mompreneurs. And today I wanted to dedicate this episode to books with marriage, whether it be something for you specifically as a wife or together as a couple, just books that I have read or that my husband has read or both of us have read that have really impacted our marriage over the years. And the interesting thing was, is as I was kind of going through this list, I'm going to list out 10 for you today. I started thinking about just those seasons of life when I was reading these books and the seasons of honestly desperation and sometime where these books really spoke to me and ministered to me. And then seasons where things were good, I was just looking to make them better. And so whatever season you're in with your marriage right now, whether you have littles at home and you're having a hard time finding time to connect, or whether you're an empty nester or you've been married for 50 years, it's always a work in progress. And, we can be a worrier or we can be a warrior, right? For the different areas of our life. And the way that Shaw and I choose to be a warrior and fight for our marriage instead of just worrying about it all the time is reading and talking to other people, being in community with people who are willing to support us and value marriage the way that we do, keeping the line of communication open when, things are kind of off. We have found over the years that's like the number one thing that gets in the way is we're not willing to be vulnerable with one another in sharing things that we're personally struggling with or things that maybe are bothering us about one another. Just being able to come from a place of love and understanding, and also being able to be vulnerable without worrying about, backlash or grudges being held. And that just comes with continually communicating and continually putting yourself out there and realizing that you can trust this person with those things that are bothering you. So I wanted to share with you just these books, and we'll include these in the show notes so that you can just easily go and grab a copy if you're interested. They're in no real order, just some books that have really helped me personally and us as a married couple. The first one I've talked about before, but I want to bring it up again because it's a book that I really feel like you could read every year because, again, depending on if you're a newlywed or maybe you're not married and you still struggle in this area with boundaries, it's just a great overall book to read to help you to be able to know when to say yes to things and when to say no to things. And it's by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. It's just a great book, especially I would say in the season of life where I first read it and it spoke loudly to me was when we went from being a married couple to parents and setting the boundaries between our family, which was our, Shaw and I and our children, with other family members. And, dynamics change when you get married, dynamics change when you start having kids, and things that were tradition before maybe get switched up and you start creating your own family traditions. And it's a tough season. And maybe some of you are experiencing that right now. So Boundaries is a great book to read when it comes to that, but not just family dynamics. This could be something in the workplace as well. But they also wrote a book, Boundaries in Marriage. And this one is about understanding the choices that make or break loving relationships. So we all have a choice in marriage, right? We have a choice of how we choose to show up, the words that come out of our mouth, the battles that we choose to fight, the things we can choose to let go of because they're not really that big of a deal at the end of the day. So this book it's boundaries, but it's specific to marriage. So I would recommend that you read that one too, just to, again, as a refresher, maybe to some boundaries. And again, whether you're in a really great season in your marriage or you're struggling, like really on the struggle bus, books don't replace therapy. They don't replace having a coach or a mentor or someone that you can talk through these things with, because how many books have we read, right, that had great information, but we didn't do anything with it. We didn't implement. And inspiration is just inspiration, right? But inspiration with implementation is transformation. And you've heard me say that before. So we're not reading books just to get inspired. We're not reading books just to get puffed up on knowledge. We need to implement those things. And sometimes having a therapist, a counselor, a coach, a mentor, or even just with one another can help you bring some of those truths and knowledge and put them into action. Okay. So the third book, I've talked about this before too, is the 5 love languages. I haven't specifically talked about the book, but I've talked about taking the test, but don't just take the test, really dive into what the 5 love languages are. And Gary Chapman wrote that book, and I honestly give it to married couples. Like that's part of their gift is the 5 love languages, because it was such a game changer for Shaw and I when we were at our marriage conference and finally realized what each other's love language was. So I don't feel like I have to go into a lot of detail on that because you've heard me talk about that one before, but the 5 love languages is amazing. He also wrote another book called, Gary Chapman, Toward a Growing Marriage. And what I love about this is it's really hitting like the key points of your marriage, the key important factors in a marriage. And there's a growth assignment with each chapter. Again, so we're not just learning about these different areas of marriage, but learning how to grow and transform these different areas of our marriage. But there's actual growth assignments at the end of each chapter to help you to implement. So that one is also by Gary Chapman, and it's called Toward a Growing Marriage. And I don't know about you, but just like anything else, if you're not growing, it's dying. So what can you do? Maybe this one book is a way for you to grow your marriage this year and to put some action behind some of the words. The 5th one is the Bible. And it's been interesting, the sermons that I've heard on different verses on marriage. And the one that I like to talk about is Ephesians 5:33, where, he instructs husbands to love their wives and wives to respect and honor their husbands. And when I heard this verse, and I don't remember if I was in church or if it was just something I was listening to on a podcast, but, he said the number one need for a man is to feel respected and honored. So our instruction in scripture was for the wife to respect and honor their husband. And that's intentional. For the husband is to love their wives. And the number one need for a woman is to feel loved and to be loved. So when you think about it, most women don't need to be told to love and nurture. It's just part of our nature. It's part of how God designed us to be. And so that's not what he was instructing us, because he knew that kind of came naturally to us. Now, some of you, it's at different extents, but I do believe that we just have that nurturing, loving personality and virtues in us. So we don't need to be told to love our husbands. We do that really well. But maybe the respect and the honor is an area where we need to be more focused on. And so that's why he instructs the women to respect and honor their husbands. So that really got my attention in the Bible, but also in another book that I'm going to share in just a few minutes, just how important that is for me to honor and respect my husband, not just in quiet and not just in my mind, but also publicly. So there's a lot of verses in scripture. I mean, the Bible, as a believing woman, is the book, right, of instruction and wisdom and encouragement and all of that. So maybe just dive into the Bible and dive into some scriptures, because that is the truth that will help guide you in the right direction when it comes to your marriage. And speaking of being a woman, a faithful woman, and being a woman of the faith, there are also 3 books specifically to the power of prayer. And I will say that prayer is not one of my top spiritual gifts, but I have seen the power of prayer. experienced it for my own self, for my own marriage, and for lots of aspects of my life. So there are actually 3 separate books that helps with this. So if you're not someone who feels like that's your spiritual gift, but you know the importance of it and you want some help with that, The Power of a Praying Wife is one. And then there's a Power of the Praying Husband. And then there's the Power of Praying Together. And the power of praying together, because again, if it's not your spiritual gift, then you probably feel awkward the first time that you sit down to pray with your spouse. But there is power in doing that. And this kind of gives you a guide on how to, what to pray, how to pray specifically for the different areas of your marriage. And she says at the front of the book, worrying about your marriage changes nothing. Praying about it can change everything. And I truly believe that. So it also, for me, and I want to speak to the ladies who are listening, which is primarily my audience, but I do know I have some men that listen to. Sometimes we can get in a place where we're nagging, right? And we just keep nagging at the husband, like things we want changed, things, that we're maybe feeling convicted on, that they're not feeling convicted on. And, God doesn't call us to nag them, doesn't call us to just keep pushing their buttons and seeing if we can get them to change, because we can't change them. We can only change ourselves, but we can pray for them. We can pray that God will change them in that area, that God will, convict them in the areas that maybe you feel like they need to be convicted in. But at the end of the day, God's will be done in and through each and every one of us. So the best thing we can do is not nag and push and tell them all the things that they're doing wrong, but to pray for them and pray that their eyes will be open to see maybe some of the areas where they are falling short. It changes your attitude, it changes your perspective, and it changes how you see each other in your relationship. So that was 3 books there: The Power of the Praying Wife, The Power of the Praying Husband, and The Power of Praying Together. So maybe you want to gift The Power of the Praying Husband to your husband or vice versa there. Okay, so the other thing about that is I think I told you on a couple episodes prior to this one that this month I'm doing kind of a couples challenge. There's actually 2. One is a book, and he's got his copy and I have my copy. And then one was just like a calendar that I printed off and had different things for you to do. But in one of the books, it talked about specifically picking a verse to pray over your husband, or pray over your spouse. So for me, I picked out one that I wanted to pray over Shaw, and then to print it off, laminate it, or put it somewhere where they can see it every day, so they know that this is what you're praying over them. And not only does that speak to your heart, right, and help you to get in alignment and in tune with Scripture and with truth to pray over your husband, but what an encouragement to him to know that that's what you're praying over him, and for him to specifically know that and have that printed out for you. So that was one of my favorite things or challenges that was given to me this month so far, was to pick out that verse and to pray that over him. So maybe every month, you can pick a different verse that you want to print out, and it could be done together as a couple. He could pick one and you could pick one, or you could maybe have the same one. There's a specific area over your marriage that y'all want to pray over, or a specific situation that maybe you're both going through that you want to collectively pray about. There's just so much power in that. And also it connects you intimately in a way that nothing else can. I firmly believe that. All right. So number 9 is called The Sexually Confident Wife. So I'm speaking to the ladies again with this one, but this one's by Shannon Etheridge. And if you are finding that part of your marriage, the intimacy in your marriage is not where you want it to be, whether it's him or you, remember, we can't control him, but we can control you. We can control ourselves. And this is an area that you're feeling lack of confidence in. And number 1, I want to encourage you that you're not alone. I want to encourage you that there is help out there for you. It's going to take being vulnerable. It's going to take being truly honest with yourself and with your spouse on where you stand with regards to the intimacy in your marriage. I was talking to someone this weekend, and they were saying, 90% of the marriage is about sex. And I don't believe that it's quite 90%, but I do believe it's very, very important. And I believe that there's lots of things fighting for our time and our energy as women and as men. And it's not just something that women struggle with. I know several couples who it's the man who struggles in this area and just has lack of drive. So I just want to encourage you that there are options out there for you to learn, to grow. But the biggest thing is staying open in your communication. going back to communication. And I am still going to have a communication expert come on. I don't know that she'll make it in the February episodes, but I'm going to have her come on and talk with you about communication specifically to marriage, but being vulnerable with one another to be able to share what your interests are, being vulnerable and sharing what you like, what you don't like, how many times a week is good for both of you, and coming to a happy medium, because not talking about it and not sharing where you're at just from personal experience, I can say that your spouse is thinking in a different way about why you're not having it. If you're not having sex consistently, if you're not being intimate consistently, from a man's perspective, they feel rejected. They feel like, is it, what's wrong with me? Is she not attracted to me? When in your mind, you may be thinking, I'm just tired. I've got littles that are pulling at me all the time, and I'm constantly doing laundry and cooking and all of these things. And so it's not that you don't find him attractive or that you're rejecting him. I mean, you are rejecting him, but you're not purposely doing that. So when you can have that communication and can talk about this, then it helps each person understand where you're at in this part of your marriage. And again, if you don't feel confident, The Sexually Confident Wife is an amazing book for you to read. And you can even read it together if you wanted to. I do believe it's on audio. They're probably all on audio. I had the book and I bought it on audio because that was a season of my life where God really convicted me that I was not providing or meeting his needs in that department. And I honestly didn't even realize it. So there's some true confession and vulnerability with you, but I do believe me sharing that will help some of you who are listening and thinking that I have it all together and that Shaw and I have always had this perfect marriage. We have had our struggles, and that has been one of them. So Sexually Confident Wife is a great book. And then the last one is about the same season. And I've talked about this one before, but there's two separate books. So one is for women only and one is for men only. And they're super small. I recommend you read them together because the one that's for women only basically kind of gives you an inside scoop into the mindset and the life of a man, what he thinks, how he thinks. That whole respect and honor was a huge one that I learned. The fact that most men, even the most confident man, feels like he's failing every day. And it just kind of helps you to shift your mindset on what you think they're thinking. And it's the same thing for the men. So then the men read the one, and it's basically the inside lives understanding women. And we're complex. We're definitely way more complex than men, but it's a short read. I highly recommend it to every couple to read. It's by Shanti Feldhahn. And I remember when I was reading this, I got so convicted about a certain area that I emailed Shanti like in the subject line, help. Like I just felt like I needed someone to tangibly talk to. And she actually emailed me and said, here's my number, call me. And I share that with you because, again, there are people out there that are willing to help. She didn't know me from anybody. I was just some random person that had read her book and was just so moved by it that I wanted someone who could help me in that area. And we talked. She was like, I'm getting ready to go into a conference, but here's my number, call me, which was just such a God thing. And we talked for a couple of sessions and she helped me. So these books are great. All of them are great. They all speak to different areas of your marriage, but the common denominator with all of them is going to be you and what you do with them. The books aren't going to change your life. The books aren't going to change your marriage. The content's not going to change your marriage unless you actually take the time to implement it. And if you need to go a step further and get counseling or go to therapy together as a couple, there's just no shame in that. I want to say that on every episode because it's so important for you to know that. Or maybe it's hiring a coach. Maybe it's just someone you trust that you can be 100% vulnerable with because you're not ready to do that with your spouse yet. Maybe you are in a rough patch and you're not wanting to go there. You have to have somebody that you can talk to and talk through some of these things with, because that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that Shaw and I see outside of communication within the marriage is sweeping things under the rug or not having that person that you feel comfortable talking through tough things with. And so you're not talking about it with anybody. You're not talking it through with anybody, and you're definitely not doing the work to change it. And so everything just piles up and piles up and piles up. And then it's kind of like that plate I talked about on a previous episode. Everything starts piling up on that plate, and the plate just gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And eventually you can't hold it up any longer, and you drop it. You drop it and it shatters For some people, that drop is a shatter and in a million pieces, and then they're trying to pull those pieces back together. And for others, you just put it down for a season, and then you are able to kind of restore some of that. But I just want to encourage you to not just be the reader of these books and learn the knowledge and get the information. So, oh, that really made me feel good. It was a great book, and then do nothing with it, because honestly, you just wasted your time. So if you have a favorite book on marriage, because there's a lot out there that I did not mention, but these are just ones that we have specifically read and that have helped us in our marriage and helped me personally as a wife. I'd love for you to share it with me either on Instagram at Martine31Williams. Shoot me a DM and let me know what your favorite book is on marriage or that's helped you in your marriage. And I'll be happy to share that on our next episode, because I know many of you are readers, smart people that you are, you're readers. And I'll keep adding to the list of books for you to use just as a resource for your marriage. Because the Mompreneur Life Remix podcast is about the mompreneur life, not just business. And this month, I really wanted to dedicate to one of my biggest passions, which is marriage. So I hope you found those books helpful. I hope that you'll pick those up and read them and implement the information that you learn, and then come share with me maybe a takeaway that you had or what's something that you're going to do and change in your marriage. If you want to talk about, have any questions, I'm not a marriage counselor, a therapist, but we have coached many couples, and it's something that I'm super passionate about. So I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thanks again for tuning in, for following the show, and I will catch you on the next episode. Well, that's a wrap, friends, for this week's episode of the Mompreneur Life Remixed podcast. Thank you so much for listening and for following the show. It means so much to me. And listen, friend, sharing is caring. So if you loved this episode and thought of some fellow mompreneurs who could benefit, send them the link. Share this episode or take a screenshot and head on over to Instagram and share and tag me at Martine31Williams. We are connected on Instagram, right? It's where you will get all the fun behind the scenes of my life and business as a mompreneur. Until next time, know that I am believing in you always.